In last place is The Hobbit: The Unexpected Journey. It can be fun seeing younger versions of a couple of the characters from the Lord of the Rings film in this prequel, but I didn't really like much else. Martin Freeman does a fine job in the role of Bilbo Baggins, but the rest of the performances and characters are really forgettable. The CGI is significantly worse in this than in the Lord of the Rings films, which doesn't make much sense because this film came out nearly 10 years later. Honestly, a pretty ugly looking and boring film with production design, effects, and cinematography that are nothing compared to the effects of the original trilogy. In 5th place is The Battle of the Five Armies. I haven't read the Hobbit book, but these films could have easily fit into one, but somehow the filmmakers found a way to make it into 3. Why? I would venture to say it's for the money, and it shows. This one is the shortest of all the Middle-earth films, probably because it barely even has a narrative. It seemed like they just threw as many action sequences as they could and strung them together with a premise that is barely even a plot. The pacing is pretty bad and there are so many underwhelming sequences. It tries to replicate the success of The Return of the King, but fails miserably. Only reason it's above The Unexpected Journey was for the fact that it isn't boring at all, just non-stop action that ended up being dumb and kind of fun. Really disappointing ending to the Hobbit trilogy, even though I wasn't even expecting it to be good. Next up in 4th place is The Desolation of Smaug. Easily the best of the Hobbit trilogy, but unfortunately I still don't think it's necessarily a good film. It has its moments, but I feel that as a whole this is just a mediocre and overlong film. Nothing really happens here, it's just a bridge between the first and final film. However, Benedict Cumberbatch is great as Smaug, and there's nothing I really hate with a passion, but nothing I really love. Overall, the movie is just okay, but once again, there's no question that the quality would be much higher if they had made one movie instead of a trilogy, because of how overlong and boring they can be. Just cracking the top 3 is The Two Towers. This one was actually good, unlike the Hobbit films. However, this one lacked the fun tone that the Fellowship of the Ring had, and was much slower. That's not always a problem, but this film dragged just the tiniest bit for me. There are many parts of this that improve upon the Fellowship of the Ring. The Battle of Helm's Deep is just truly epic, well choreographed, and probably better than the fight scenes in this film's predecessor. And Gollum is exceptional. He was definitely a big technical achievement when this was released. Obviously, he's meant to be a villain, however he can be quite sympathetic and has some amazing lines. Even though this is the weaker one, it is still a very good film. It really shows what a great trilogy The Lord of the Rings is. In 2nd place, I have The Fellowship of the Ring. I'm not a huge fan of the fantasy genre, and this leans heavily into that genre, but I still love this, and obviously my number 1 pick. This movie is 3 hours long, but I didn't think it was boring at all. It surprised me with how entertaining and emotional it was. It's quite impressive what they did for the early 2000s, however, there are moments of wonky CGI that took me out of the moment. One example is the CGI during the You Shall Not Pass sequence. This film has a fun tone that makes it a little easier to digest than The Two Towers, making me like it quite a bit more. In my opinion, this is a fantastic film, and not even the best of the Middle-earth films. But easily in 1st place is The Return of the King. The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King is nothing short of a breathtaking achievement. It's a more than worthy conclusion to this modern epic. My expectations were high, but this film still managed to blow them out of the water. This was already one of the most emotional films I had ever seen, and the ending was especially gut-wrenching. Seeing Frodo say goodbye to his friends at the end hit way harder than I ever imagined. Samwise and Frodo's journey is one of the most beguiling plotlines ever put to screen in my opinion, so seeing scenes like that are why this is now one of my favorite films. It felt like I was with them every step of the way, and when Samwise said, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you," and then proceeded to carry Frodo up the hill was an incredibly wholesome and uplifting moment. Literally. It's a tale of heroes bonded together by the friendship between Frodo and Sam that was truly glorious. Some might get mad at me for comparing this to Endgame, but this film is just the portal sequence if it was 3.5 hours long. Return of the King is the most epic film of all time, with extraordinarily directed battle sequences from Peter Jackson. He deservedly won the Oscar for Best Director, as this film justifiably won every Oscar it got nominated for. This is a powerful and enchanting grand finale to Peter Jackson's massively ambitious adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy.